Hi there, I am the Reverend Danny Crosby, a Unitarian minister serving congregations in Altrincham and in Urmston in the northwest of England. And I offer this devotion as a balm for the heart, for the mind, for the spirit, for the soul. It is titled Sabbath Time, Becoming Human Beings Rather Than Human Doings. And I'm going to begin with a favourite poem. The Peace of Wild Things by that farmer poet, farmer first before a poet, by that farmer poet Wendell Berry. The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. How vital it is to rest in whatever grace, in whatever peace we can find in this world. So often in life we find ourselves wrestling with someone or something, often with ourselves, like Jacob at the riverside. In the end though, I know myself that I always surrender. I find myself resting in the presence of still water. And I find peace, and I find grace, and I am blessed as Jacob was blessed. I've been somewhat tired and a little run down of late. This was probably caused by a bout of ill health that was very much stomach related and drained all my energy. I've also had one or two difficult situations that have drained me emotionally, mentally and spiritually too, actually. So I've been physically resting, including avoiding going to the gym. I returned last Monday, and I have to say it was a real slog. In fact, last Monday was a slog in general. But later in the day, ideas about what I might want to look at this week and in this devotion began to form. I thought about the need to find space, to find rest, to find stillness, to surrender to the grace of this world, this need for Sabbath time, if you like. By Tuesday morning, I felt much better. And my Tuesday morning began as it always does, in silence in my meditation group as we humbled ourselves to the silence, surrendered to the silence, to the stillness. It felt wonderful to sit in silence with others, to rest and not to wrestle. I then went to Urmston to join their Common Search for Meaning group. John Poskett led a wonderful conversation on pleasure, on the things in life that bring us pleasure, especially pleasure in difficult times. It felt like a real joy for all of us who were there. I found it hit that lovely spot. It got me thinking not just about Sabbath and rest as a form of recuperation, but also how much leisure and pleasure are vital to the soul. In some ways, my greatest pleasure comes from space, from the pauses in life. I've also found that sometimes the greatest pleasure is in pleasure delayed, not instant pleasure. We live in an age when we want things and we want them immediately, right here, right now. We live in such an instant culture where pleasure must come on demand, on tap almost. But there is a joy and a pleasure in patience as in waiting. In many ways, this is the essence, I think, of Sabbath time in living by pleasure, actually. But we want it. We want it all, and we want it all now. We want it all so much that we race through life, and by racing through life, we don't feel life, we don't feel alive, we feel nothing. This is wonderfully illustrated in a favourite story of mine. It's a story of a workaholic businessman who decides to go on a safari in Africa. So he plots a course and determines a timetable. He hires workers from a local village to carry the various containers and cases. On the first morning, the entire party rouse early, and they travelled very fast, very, very, very fast, and they went very, 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 very far. On the second morning, they roused early, they travelled very, 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 very fast, and they went very, 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 very far. On the third day, exactly the same. On the fourth morning, the local tribesmen refused to move. The man gestured out irately and fumed at the translator to get them going. The translator said, "They will not move." "Why not?" the man bellowed, thinking of all the time wasted and money spent. And the translator simply shrugged and said, "Well, because they are waiting for their souls to catch up with their bodies." Waiting for their souls to catch up with their bodies. And the story brings to mind a fantastic line from the wonderful film Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Here the hero of the film, Ferris Bueller, utters the immortal words, "Life moves pretty fast, and if you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it." The pace of modern day life can be quite frightening. People are always on the move. They always seem to be doing something or nothing, so long as they are not standing still or idling around. People always seem to be in a rush to be anywhere than where they actually are, to be doing anything other than what they're actually doing, and to be feeling anything other than what they're actually feeling. Seemingly we need to always be on the move, for fear that life might just catch up with us. So often we try to force things through, to wrestle with everything just to get our will, what we think we need. So much so that we tie ourselves up in knots, and we tie up everything up in knots. The wrestling just becomes a mess, a knotted mess. And sometimes we just need to surrender, to pause. Sometimes we just need to simply rest in the grace of life and be blessed. I noticed myself doing a bit of wrestling on Monday morning when I was out walking with Molly in the park. Instead of just enjoying the experience of her enjoying herself, I was preoccupied with what I needed to do that day. I was wrestling and arguing with myself. Thankfully, though, I surrendered. I let go of control and I got chatting with folk there, while Molly just ran around and played with the other dogs. I get great pleasure from Molly's natural joy, her friendliness, her playfulness. It helps me to connect to and to allow it to everything, and to allow my soul to catch up with my body. It feels like such a grace. And it's a spiritual practice because it increases my sensitivity to life as I rest, as I surrender, as I rest in life. Prayer and meditation do the same, but maybe not as joyfully. Prayer and meditation slow down my being, and they enable me to connect, and somehow in this space I get to hear that still small voice of calm. I get to hear the voice divine, the I am in everything. There is no place it isn't, so I need to rest in this world. So even in those, especially in those little dogs in the park, and the big ones too. So Sabbath time in my daily life is vital, for it allows me to live more fully in the world. It allows me to rest in the grace of life. Sabbath and Sabbath time is so vital. I remember a few years ago being invited to Hale Synagogue to attend Friday evening Shabbos. It was powerful, beautiful and moving, especially the singing of Shabbos was welcomed like welcoming a bride. During the ceremony, I felt like I was allowing my soul to catch up with me. I found myself resting in the grace of the day and not wrestling with myself or everything in life itself. And I've also been in Jerusalem on the Sabbath and experienced, or virtually experienced, the whole city sitting and resting in silence. It was an incredible experience, something that we who live in the UK will probably never experience again. So it just goes to show me how important it is to rest in Sabbath, in the busyness of life. It may not be for a day, so we have to make Sabbath time today in our culture. The Sabbath, of course, relates back to Genesis 1 and the creation of life. Genesis 1 depicts 6 acts of creation, and on the 7th day, on the climax, God rests. God looks at his creation and sees that it is very good indeed. It is a blessing. He pauses. He smells the roses and allows his soul to catch up with him. Why on earth would God need to do this? Why do we need to pause and look at our own creations, our own lives? Well, maybe because it's only when we stop and look at our lives and our work that meaning begins to truly emerge. If our hearts, our souls are not in what we are doing, it is unlikely that we'll do a good job of what we're doing. So we need this space, this time, this silence to humbly surrender to it in order to fully live and engage with all of life. How often do any of us stop and look at the meaning behind what we have created, what we are creating? How often do we actually spend time increasing our sensitivity to our own lives? When do we take time to stop wrestling with something and begin to rest in the grace of life? The great rabbi of the 1960s, really, of the second half of the 20th century in America, the Rabbi Abraham Heschel, claimed that the Sabbath as a day of rest is not for the purpose of recovering one's strength and becoming fit for the forthcoming labour. The Sabbath is a day for the sake of life. It is for life itself. Maybe by welcoming in the Sabbath, we allow our souls to catch up with our bodies. Sabbath time allows us to connect to life, and I found that in life itself, that's when I need to be silent to hear the voice divine as it speaks through reality. Somehow in that still, small voice of calm, incredible things are given birth to, begin to happen. It blows my mind. Now the Jewish people invented the concept of Sabbath, but you know what? It didn't make them popular. Again, according to Rabbi Heschel, when the Romans first encountered the Jews and noticed their habits of keeping the Sabbath, of refraining from labour every 7th day, their reaction was nothing but utter contempt. The Jewish people had escaped slavery. The book of Exodus recounts their wanderings in the wilderness as they searched for home. They knew that slaves never rested, and perhaps during their time in the desert, they never rested too. Maybe it was only on Sinai they realised that although they had escaped Egypt and slavery, they were still slaves in so many other ways. So maybe, just maybe, this is why they created the concept of Sabbath. Was it a grace, or did they create it? Or maybe a mixture of both? Maybe our modern rejection of a Sabbath day isn't really progress at all, but a return to a more dehumanising culture where human beings are seen as nothing more than commodities who do without ceasing. Human doings, not human beings. Perhaps we've all become enslaved by this need to constantly be doing. By constantly doing, have we actually enslaved our own souls? Maybe we don't actually need to let our souls catch up with us. What we really need to do is to free our souls We need to find ways to stop wrestling with everything all the time and simply learn to rest in the grace of life. We live in an instantaneous culture which demands instant results. I think we even demand instant results with our leisure and our pleasure time. We have lost this sense of patience with everything, it would seem to me. They say that patience is a virtue, but it seems to be one that most of us have yet to learn. When things seem difficult, I think patience is the hardest spiritual practice of them all, actually. For we want all our troubles over, and we want our troubles over now. Something I've been feeling, actually, I've not been too patient myself as I've watched the world and this election that seems to be going on forever. I don't know when it will come to an end. Well, 2 weeks. Need patience though. These things are important and things take time, not when I want them. Patience, silence, stillness, gently resting quietly, humbly and passively waiting is considered almost inhuman in our day and age, uncivilized. Like the businessman in the story I shared earlier. Something I can experience myself when I'm stuck in a queue or in the traffic or waiting on the phone for some operative to finally answer. Patience is so vital in life and it's something we need to develop actually. It doesn't come easily. It brings to mind a wonderful piece of wisdom by Wayne Muller, who wrote in the wonderful book Sabbath, Restoring the Sacred Rhythm of Rest and Delight. Here he tells a wonderful story about the wisdom of waiting and the wisdom of resting. He wrote, I was speaking with Hans-Peter Dürr, who for 20 years collaborated with Nobel Prize winner Werner Heisenberg, the discoverer of the famous uncertainty principle in quantum physics. Himself a noted quantum physicist, Hans-Peter told me that he often had long, impassioned discussions with Heisenberg when they were working together on a particular problem. We would be talking excitedly about the problem from every angle, and then suddenly Heisenberg would say, Wait, I think we have touched on something very important here. Let's not talk about it anymore. Let's wait for 2 weeks and let it solve itself. Then, when we go back together 2 weeks later, it would invariably be solved. We would begin talking, and we both knew that we had the answer. Wow, isn't that amazing? There is something, it's humble, this surrendering, and it allows the space for things to develop. And there's something deeply humble about Sabbath time, about rest, about not wrestling, about not fighting with everything. There is something deeply humble about simply waiting. By lying down in the presence of still waters. In so many ways, actually, this is the ultimate spiritual practice. It's humility that opens us up to something more, to something beyond our singular selves. Something that is so easily missed as we rush around frantically trying to get from where we are to where we want to be, or to solve all our troubles in an instant. Instead of constantly struggling and striving, sometimes all we have to do, is just be still, surrender. Be still and know that we're not God. And then to rest in the grace of the world. And then suddenly in time and in rest and in space, the answers, they seem to be found. Whether they come or we unearth them, nobody knows. We let our souls though catch up with our bodies. And then we connect with reality and find once we do so that we're of use once more. Powerful. We need Sabbath. We need to stop and take in life. We need to feel our feet on the ground. All ground is holy ground. There are no unsacred spaces. There are only sacred and desecrated places. To quote good old Wendell Berry again. And we desecrate places by the way that we exist in places. And we bless them too. All life is sacred. All ground is holy ground. And we need to be still and silent enough in this holy ground, enough to hear that still small voice that comes in the silence. We need to rest in the grace of the world. We need to allow our senses to sense life, and then and only then will we see the riches in our lives and then be able to truly give thanks for life itself. And we need to do this by practicing patience. And then through patience, whatever our work may be, we will do our work well, in body and mind and heart and in soul. Patience, my friends, patience. Let us find peace and rest in the grace of the world. So I'm going to end this devotion. Well, there's going to be some final words of blessing after this poem that I'm going to share with you. And it's a wonderful poem called First Sabbath by Nancy Saffer. The poem's a kind of reflection on that very first Sabbath in the first book of Genesis. That beautiful, beautiful mythos that is the first creation story in Genesis, where this original blessing that is life itself is described. So this is Nancy Saffer and the first Sabbath, which is found in her book Instructions in Joy. Tell me, did you really rest? You who made day and night and sky that separated waters above and below. You who told the waters below the sky to stay in one place and out of them asked dry land. Who told the earth to send out growing things and then made sun and moon and stars. Who made birds that fly and everything that swims, and cattle and all creeping things, and every animal untamed, and then made man and woman, and finally supposedly rested. Tell me, how in the midst of all that buzzing and flapping and slithering and stepping, all that bursting forth of leaf and fruit and stem that never had known themselves before, tell me, how could you possibly have rested? After seeing what no one ever had seen before, beak, hoof, pebble, after losing yourself in 1,000 versions of blue, water in sun, sky against sky, the horizon where sky and water meet. How did you shut your eyes? How not keep turning and looking? Didn't you long to caress each small thing? Notice how toes work and stamens and fingers? Weren't you hollering out in amazement? Weren't you so filled up glad you could not sleep? Wow, isn't that amazing? And yet, on the seventh day, God saw his creation and saw that it was good and rested in the grace and the peace of life. Amen. So I'm going to end with some final words of blessing. These words of blessing are attributed to Chief Dan George. You know, we all need to bless more. And we can all bless. It's not down to special people. With our simple, beautiful humanity, we can bless. And if we can bless in all that we live and breathe and share our being with, everything is a blessing and can be blessed. And we bless by giving ourselves wholeheartedly to life. And we bless by resting, you know. That's wholehearted too. You don't have to do anything. It's not about what we do, it's about how we be. We are human beings, not human doings. So here's some final words of blessing. The beauty of the trees, the softness of the air, the fragrance of the grass speaks to me. The summit of the mountain, the thunder of the sky, the rhythm of the sea speaks to me. The faintness of the stars, the freshness of the morning, the dew drop on the flower speaks to me. The strength of the fire, the taste of salmon, the trail of the sun and the life that never goes away. They speak to me, and my heart soars. But you need to rest. So rest in the peace and the grace of this our world. And may the love of God go with us all, and may it do so in all that we feel, in all that we think, in all that we say, and in all that we do. Go in love, go in peace,